Tonight, the UK faces a growing youth unemployment crisis. But is the government making the problem better or worse? New figures show the highest unemployment rate since the peak of the pandemic, with economists and the opposition pointing the finger at the Chancellor's policies and her indecision. Also ahead, the government's legislation granting people more rights in the workplace passed its final hurdle this evening. The Conservatives have called it the unemployment bill, although right will debate. Also ahead in the next hour, the Community Secretary launches a review into foreign financial interference in UK politics, saying that the conduct of the former Reform UK leader in Wales, jailed for taking bribes to make pro-Russian statements, was a stain on British democracy. The Prime Minister hosts a Hanukkah event in Downing Street as more tragic stories emerge of the anti-Semitic attack at Bondi Beach in Sydney. Donald Trump launches a multi-billion-dollar case against the BBC as the government sets out its blueprint for the future financing of the broadcaster. But whose side would the Prime Minister take if it boiled down to Trump or anti? And as a think tank slams politicians for not speaking in normal English, is it time we waged a war against jargon? We'll be circling back on that with our panel tonight, Tom Pursglove and Hannah Patel. They'll be taking it offline with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday. I'm Darren McCaffrey, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. A very good evening. Now, at the heart of what we talk about on this programme most nights falls back, let's be honest about this, to the state of the economy. Because without a healthy, growing economy, all the things the government wants to do, increase defence spending, stop doctors from going on strike, trying to bring down that national debt, well, it all becomes much more difficult if the economy is not growing. And as we end this year, the picture is yet again pretty bleak. Today, we'll learn that employment and those out of jobs is up to 5.1%. Labour, when they came to power, it was 4.1%. Youth unemployment has hit 16%. That is a worryingly 10-year high. Now, employers are blaming that national insurance rise and an increase in the minimum wage. And there are lots more flashing lights when it comes to the economy too. Last week, GDP again reported a fall. It means the economy has experienced no growth for 4 months in a row. In fact, it has shrunk for more than half of the months that Labour has been in government. And all this as 10.4 million, I'll repeat that, 10.4 million people of working age have reported a disability in Britain today. Now, of course, the government claim it's going to take more than 18 months to turn all this around, that lousy inheritance from the Conservatives. And on that front, they may well be right. But I think what's concerning for many is that far from turning things around, on lots of measurements, they're actually getting worse. And it's something that voters and businesses are increasingly growing wary of, that Labour blame game. I think it's simply not going to last. Well, our first report tonight comes from our business and economics correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, who's been looking at today's unemployment figures.
When 23-year-old Hashim resigned from his job as a prison officer last year, he didn't think it would be this hard to find another one.
At the time, I thought it would be easy, but it was actually the opposite, the complete opposite. I've gone on Indeed and things like that, and they haven't even replied to me, so it's been quite difficult.
He's put in more than 50 applications and is now running out of options. And across the country, it feels like the opportunities are shrinking. Vacancies have been falling consistently since 2022, especially for entry-level work. And the unemployment rate has just hit 5.1%. People like Hashim are bearing the brunt. Youth unemployment is now at 16%. At the Beaumont estate in Leighton, East London, Lee is helping local residents like Hashim get off benefits and into work. And so you're literally helping neighbours?
You're helping neighbours, and also it's like the Bush Telegraph, like I said. So, you know, I've helped a father. The father's asked me to help his daughter.
He says the current jobs market is the toughest he's ever seen.
If you look at any position now, there's going to be 100 and 150 people apply for each position. A lot of employers are not recruiting, so the pool of live vacancies is even smaller than it was.
The challenges facing Britain's labour market are complex. The availability of jobs is a problem, but the workforce also has struggles of its own. I've come to Bidston Rise in Birkenhead, where the unemployment rate is above 12%, and almost 40% of working-age people aren't even looking for work.
So, this is our office.
Sally, Ellie and the team are working to turn things around, but it takes so much more than just polishing CVs.
I'd say about half the people that we're working with have been facing some sort of debt. We've had one person that we supported who their debt had caused them to be cut off for their internet and their telephone, which meant that they couldn't do things like get online to do job search. Sometimes you get a mix of people have the ambition, but they think that, oh, but people like me don't do that. And it's trying to get past that confidence barrier.
A third of the residents here are on universal credit. A similar proportion have a reported disability, and rates of depression are more than double the national average. Mick can identify with all three, a landscape gardener by trade who has been out of work for a decade after losing both his legs, the second to vascular disease.
I mean, I'm quite lucky. I know I'm getting on a bit now, but I've lost my legs, but I can still do a certain amount of stuff. There's people out there who struggle to get out of bed in the morning, but they're having their benefits cut because they're saying they're fit for work. It's ridiculous.
Mental health challenges are easy to dismiss, but they can be just as debilitating as physical disabilities. Hello, Mark. Nice to meet you. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
And for the local GP, Dr. Mark Fraser, nothing is happening in isolation.
The cost of food, the cost of energy, the cost of housing, cost of clothes, things have gone up considerably in price. Where the bread line used to be, we're down to the breadcrumbs line. There's no doubt that it's very difficult for you to contemplate healthy living when you're awake all night worrying about if you can afford the next bill.
And with all that baggage, entering the field of work only gets more difficult. Hashim has found that football is the best distraction, but looking for work is an even more competitive sport, and it's getting more and more difficult for some people to take part. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
Well, a little earlier, I spoke to the Sentencing Minister, Jake Richards, who today was announcing plans to toughen sentencing for those who attack police and prison officers. I did ask him about that, but as you'll see, I started the interview by asking him about those unemployment figures. Jake, good to see you again.
Good evening.
Let's talk about what you're planning to do in terms of tougher sentences. Talk us through why you think this is necessary.
Well, look, we believe, and this government believes, that the full force of the law has to be brought down on anyone who is violent or offensive towards senior public servants. And what I mean by that is police officers, prison officers, probation officers, people who do really difficult jobs in tough circumstances. And what we're doing today is about a small number of cases, thankfully, a very small number of cases, but where we have prison officers who are killed because of the work they do, we think it's right that those offenders should receive the toughest punishment, which means a whole life order, which means they'll never be released.
The one thing, of course, to keep prison officers safer, though, is to invest in our prison system. How much is the Ministry of Justice budget going to grow over the next 5 years?
Well, on prison security in particular, we've just announced an investment of £40 million to improve security measures, £10 million for protective equipment for prison officers. So, look, we need investment in our prison service. When I go out and about and go to prisons and speak to prison officers, the biggest issue that they face is one of capacity. Because when the prisons are bursting at the seams, as they were when we came into the government last summer, that makes everything more difficult. Security, getting prisoners out of cells for meaningful activity, which helps broadly in the prison community. And so we are dealing with those capacity issues with two main ways. One, we're building more prisons than ever before, the biggest prison building programme since the Victorian era. And two, we're introducing sentencing reforms that will start to ease demand over time. That is the best way we can look after our prison officers and make our prisons safe.
So, is it fair to say this, and I ask this from a complete point of ignorance, that you are effectively lessening sentences on more minor crimes, but increasing them on what you might view as more serious crimes? Is that fair?
Well, look, it's a bit more complex than that, but look, yes. So what we're trying to do is we don't think that short-term sentences are working in this country. And we're not the only ones that think that. The evidence shows it very clearly. So if you get a sentence of less than 12 months in prison at the moment, then reoffending rates are nearly 70%. So they're not working, they're costing the taxpayer more money, they're not confronting reoffending, they're leading to more crime on our streets. So what we're introducing is a presumption against short-term sentences, not banning them altogether. They have their place, in particular in domestic abuse cases, but we think that we should be urging the judiciary to look at alternative options for those short-term sentences, which aren't working for anyone. But today we've introduced tougher sentences for the absolute worst offenders. And look, when I speak to my constituents, that strikes me as what people want to see. They don't want people to be thrown in prison for a few weeks. They want, for the toughest, most serious offences, really tough punishment, but smarter sentencing for those lesser offences to really make sure that those people don't do it again.
Now, there isn't much prison capacity at the moment as it stands, and as you guys say, you are building more prisons. When are you expecting this to actually, this capacity to come on stream? I mean, if you're on to these tougher sentences now, when potentially are you going to see the availability where you can lock people up for longer?
Well, we're starting to see that green shoots of recovery thanks to the prison building programme that this government has implemented already. So almost 3,000 places have been built in 18 months of a Labour government. That is opposed to just 500 extra places over 14 years of a Conservative government. So look, there was a complete dereliction of duty by the Conservatives. We are aiming to fix that. We are beginning to see some capacity. There's still huge challenges, and I'm not for a minute suggesting this is solved. And that is why the sentencing bill, which needs to receive royal assent next year, is so important to make sure that the prison system is sustainable, not just for this year, not just next year, but for decades to come.
OK, just very finally on this, and I don't want to be too flippant about this, but also can you make promises that you're not going to release some of these prisoners early? Because that's happened quite a lot recently.
Well, there have been errors in release, and any single error in a release is not acceptable. That's why we've announced a review of the processes which have led to these errors, and that will be reporting in February next year. I know the Deputy Prime Minister met with Dame Lynn Owens, who is leading that review, a very senior and respected former police constable. All I would say is this is a symptom of a failing prison system over a long period of time. So again, under the last government, there were 800 errors in release that we know about. And look, I'm not saying it's acceptable that it's happening under our watch, and that's why we're taking action.
I just want to touch on one other thing today, because it's been notable. I mean, you've obviously, maybe justifiably so, blamed the prison situation on the previous Conservative government. Is that also true of today's unemployment rate, which has gone up yet again from 4.1% when you guys got in to now 5.1%? Youth unemployment at 16%, a 10-year high. Whose fault's that?
Well, there's still a lot of work to do on it. There's 350,000...
Well, no, it's not the work to be done. It's going in the opposite direction. It's getting worse under your watch.
There's 350,000 more people in the labour market than there were at the last general election. That obviously has an effect on the statistics. But look, I'm not saying today's statistics are a rallying cry, and we've got to do more. We've invested over £1 billion in apprenticeships. The Secretary of State for Work and Pensions will be setting out a new year, new plans to ensure that we get young people back into work. Look, it's not just a financial problem when young people aren't in work or education. It's a moral crisis because we have too many young people in our country who, after leaving education, after leaving school or college or university, aren't getting the structure and discipline of work that they need. We're the Labour Party. We believe in work.
Well, that's my point.
And that's why we need to get more people.
So what do you say
back
to
into
businesses, hundreds of them, thousands of them, who say, this is really simple. This is down to national insurance rises, it's down to increases in the minimum wage, and it's down to the hokey-cokey budget, where there was lots of uncertainty. I mean, literally, businesses who actually employ people, that's what they say.
No, I understand that, and I speak to small businesses about these issues.
Do you
all the
agree
time
with
my
them?
constituency? Look, there were necessary and fair decisions to make around tax at this budget and the budget last year because the public finances need that stability. And by the way, if we don't make those difficult decisions...
You created loads of uncertainty in the lead up to the budget.
If we don't make difficult decisions in terms of public finances, it's very easy to try and be popular when it comes to tax and spend. But then if the economy gets out of your control, as we saw which happened under the Conservative Party, that's worse off for young people, it's worse off for businesses, it's worse off for everyone. And so, look, difficult decisions were made. There's much more work to be done to get young people back into work. We're seeing investment in apprenticeships, but there is also welfare reforms that will need to take place to make sure that we encourage and incentivise people back to work.
Just finally on this, I think sometimes governments have to own things. As I say, unemployment is up. The economy has shrank essentially every single month for the last 4 months. It's now also shrank half the time Labour has been in power. So much for economic growth. And there are 10.4 million people of working age who reported disability in Britain today. I mean, you're right, you're the Labour Party. I mean, those figures are bad. And the worst thing is they are, on all measures, getting worse.
Well, the growth forecasts have been upgraded by the OBR at the budget.
This is the reality rather than forecast.
But look, there is a lot of work to be done. And no one for a minute is suggesting that in the first 18 months we've managed to turn the ship around. The country was in a complete mess back in 2024, not just because of Conservative mismanagement, because we had a pandemic, because of war in Europe. We were in a difficult position. That's not going to be turned around overnight. I believe this government has made really important progress.
The accusation here is that, yes, it may well have been bad, but you are making it, your government is making it worse.
I don't accept that at all, because, look, you raise certain issues. Let me come back at you some others. NHS waiting lists coming down. We promised 2 million appointments. We've managed to deliver 5 million appointments. We're recruiting more police officers to be on our streets to keep it safe. We just spoke about the prisons crisis. I mean, last summer, when we came into government, we literally had to release prisoners early because there wasn't any more space to keep our criminal justice system afloat. Okay. We're beginning to fix the problems in our country and beginning to turn things around.
OK. Jake Richards, as always, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas to you as well. Right, let's bring in our panel for this evening. We've got the former Conservative Minister Tom Pursglove and the former SNP MP Hannah Bardell. Also delighted to say, joining me for this chat is the Labour MP James Frith. Very good evening to you all. Good evening. And James, we'll come to you in a second. Tom, let's start with you. You know, let's be honest about this. You know, Jake is right. Things were not good, of course, last July when Labour took over. What's your sense of where we're at now in terms of employment and the overall economy?
Well, I would make the point that under the Conservative government that I was a part of, we were seeing 800 jobs a day created in our economy. And what we've seen is that this Labour government is doing what all Labour governments do, which is to tax more, which is to borrow more, which is to push unemployment up. And there's just a lack of coherent strategy around this. I think you were right to push the minister on this point, because if you look, for example, at the consequences of putting more burdens on business, putting more and additional taxes on business, for example, the national insurance increases, it makes it really difficult to be able to get out there and employ people in the volumes that help to actually stimulate economic growth.
Yeah, but Tom, at the same time, I mean, he's right in the fact that you lost this election. You lost that election because, largely, you mishandled the economy. I mean, the economy's been bumbling around for the last 14, 15 years. You've been in power for most of that time.
We undoubtedly made mistakes in government, and it was always going to be very difficult to try and win a fifth term. It's unprecedented. It hasn't happened before, and we were rowing against that tide. I think people had enough. I think we didn't keep all the promises that we made, and there is a very stiff penalty to be paid for that. People are fed up, and actually what they're seeing with this government is more and more broken promises, and actually what they're seeing is, in many respects, things getting worse, including around employment.
Hannah?
I think one of the things that neither of the main parties want to talk about or admit is that Brexit has been an unmitigated disaster. We have had, huge amounts of investment have left the UK. We've had a reduction in rights. We've had a slowing down of the economy, and it's had an absolutely profound impact. And for me, it's really tragic that Labour won't face up to that. And I think could have stood on a manifesto commitment to say, look, it's been a disaster. Here is the damage that it's done. Let people have another say, and they have failed to do that. But I think it's interesting, though, that the UK rate of unemployment is, obviously at a record high. In Scotland, it's only 3.7%. And there's a mixed picture there. Part of that is because we have got a bigger public sector. We have chosen to protect those public sector jobs. To be fair to Labour, they're trying to reinvest in that. I think they do have a fair argument that it was left in a complete mess, but that only cuts mustard for so long. There comes a point when people get a bit fed up and they're like, right, OK, we get it, but what are you doing to fix it? OK, let's bring James in now, because he's
you feel warmed up.
I was going to say, I think you've heard it all, so I've got no question to you apart from what's your response.
Well, look, the challenge facing the government when it came into power was enormous. That remains enormous. There has been success along the way. There has been progress made. But my goodness me, there's a huge amount still to do. And nobody is in any doubt on that fact.
Just on that point, though.
I didn't get as long as them.
I know, sorry. I do want to. The argument you're talking, and that's fair. And we've heard that argument many times before. And you know what? Lots of people accept that argument that things are really bad and it is going to take a long time. But the question here is that things are getting worse. That budget that was all over the place in the months leading up to add an uncertainty.
Let me try and recover my flow, if I may, because there's no doubt about it. In terms of the progress being made, we've seen interest rates come down, and I expect them to continue to. Therefore, debt and money becomes cheaper for smaller businesses as well as mortgage holders and homeowners. The problems with the employment market are much bigger than one quarter's figures, in truth. And I would like, actually, a bigger conversation about the impact of small and medium-sized companies adjusting to the use of AI, which is hugely welcome as a productivity. But on the point of the biggest substantive within those figures around young people, these are entry-level jobs being replaced by the use of and the adoption of AI.
The Economist and the Financial Times has done loads of evidence. There's actually very little suggestion.
I could come to Bury and I'll take you to 3 businesses where I had exactly those conversations, where they are ready to tell me the good story about how they're adopting productivity tools and the use of AI, which means they don't need to recruit as much and they don't need as many entry-level jobs. That is going to be a bigger challenge as time goes on. Much bigger, in fact, than one quarter's ONS.
Well, and we all know that the best way to improve all of this, by the way, as I said at the top of the programme, is economic growth. And on that, I mean, you have to be honest, you are failing on that.
I don't accept that.
Well, I mean, you accept that the figures speak for themselves.
But one quarter, again, to the point.
So you've been in power for 18 months.
Growth has been...
There's literally half of those months have seen no economic growth, or they've seen negative economic growth.
It's going to take some time for the investments and the policies that the government have put in place. We've only actually had, if you consider what the policies for this budget that's just happened won't come in till April in a great many cases. So, in fact, it's only one budget in. We deserve a little bit longer, I think, before any judgment is cast in a broader sense. But there are improvements to our NHS. There is improvements to access to healthcare in constituencies like mine. We've brought in breakfast clubs, introduced a living wage and a minimum wage increase. And actually, there are more jobs in the job market than ever before, which talks to Tom's point about the creation of jobs under his last government, is a similar point. There are actually more jobs than ever before.
Well, one of the things I want to talk about tonight with you guys, because it's all connected to this, of course, is the government's flagship employment rights bill is set to become law after it finally passed through Parliament this afternoon. The legislation means a ban on zero-hour contracts and day one rights to statutory sick pay. Well, a little earlier, we heard from the Business Minister, Kate Dearden. Let's have a listen.
This is a significant step forward for workers' rights across the UK. I'm really, really proud that as a government we are delivering this. I'm really delighted that we are now out of the parliamentary process and heading towards royal assent so we can deliver for millions of working people across this country and upgrade workers' rights so it's fit for the 21st century. I'm really, really proud that we've delivered this today and it's a really brilliant moment for us.
Well, perhaps unsurprisingly, the Conservatives are pretty critical of the bill. We've heard from the Shadow Business Secretary, Andrew Griffith, this afternoon saying this was and remains a bad bill. It will pile costs onto small businesses, freeze hiring and ultimately leave young people and job seekers paying the price for Labour's capitulation to the union paymasters. James, you'll obviously welcome, I assume, this news tonight that this has passed. But the problem is, when you listen to employers, the businesses who actually employ people, you say you talk to them, you must also recognise they have got grievances on national insurance increases, for some on the minimum wage, but also on this. They argue this is going to make it more difficult or less appealing to employ people.
Look, in order to grow the economy sustainably, we need secure work. And I think that the people I represent deserve well-paid, secure work. We wouldn't for a minute suggest that you had to earn through a period of time going without pay. And all this does is draw alongside working rights that many of us already take for granted, many employers already adopt, and says from day one you'll have access to these rights. It strengthens rights of flexible working, which is an improvement to the flexible market that we need in our jobs. and our employment sector. Again, a lot of employers tell me that they welcome that. They understand the changing patterns of work and they're adopting the changes accordingly. This is hugely welcome for secure employment.
Tom?
It just adds to this environment that is not conducive to seeing employment going in the right direction.
It improves the lives of lots of people who are in work.
Well, we already have in this country some of the most forward-leaning employment laws anywhere in the world, and that's a good thing. I welcome that. But you do have to calibrate these decisions against the wider economic conditions that you find yourself in, but also be more strategic. So I look, for example, at disability and health benefits. Government is doing the right thing, for example, when it comes to the right to work guarantee, removing work disincentives, trying to get people closer to the labour market. But the conditions that they're creating, on the other hand, are making it harder for the very people who would benefit from the structural reform in welfare to be able to access those opportunities in practice because of the costs of doing business. And that is not a good place to be, and they need to address that. They need to be much more holistic and much more structured in looking at this challenge.
Hannah, what do you think about this? Because, I mean, by the way, this is going to apply to England, Wales and Scotland, isn't it, this employment bill? Yeah. I mean, the point is that, you know, businesses aren't, I would say, just making stuff up. I mean, no. and they would argue that at a time in which there is a tightening and, you know, that unemployment is going up, that this is not what they need right now. Yeah. That actually one of Britain's big benefits is that they're not quite as liberal as the United States, but they're not quite as strident as the rest of Europe. That's left Britain in a bit of an economic good place.
I mean, I'm not sure that we want to be modelling anything about our economy or our social contract on the US. I think there are realities to be faced for the business community that you're absolutely right, they're under huge pressure. Again, I go back to that point about Brexit. You know, their pipelines have become much shorter and tighter. It's more expensive to do business. The cost of living's gone through the roof. Nonetheless, I do believe, even though the bill has been watered down, that it's the right thing to do. You know, in Scotland, we have a long and proud tradition of engaging with the unions, and working with the unions. I, of course, am going to say, as a former SNP MP and member, that I would want to see these powers devolve to Scotland. And that is because this, as good as the measures are, they could be short-term. If we end up with a reform government, everybody in the UK is going to suffer, and it would be the only way of protecting Scotland. But I have a concern for everybody else in the UK that Reform want to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. That's going to reduce workers' rights. They will absolutely roll back on all of this.
See.
So I think Labour have done a fairly good job.
OK, let's not jump the gun on whether we're going to see a reform government or not just yet. But talking about Brexit, because it's come up again tonight, and James, we're reading in both The Guardian and The Times that apparently the government's going to announce tomorrow that we're going to rejoin the Erasmus Students Exchange Scheme from 2027. I'm sure Hannah's going to welcome it an awful lot. Do you welcome it?
I would welcome it. I hope I'll be in the chamber tomorrow to hear the full details of it. Your producer kindly sent me the link that you've just called up, so I've read it the same.
Do you feel frustrated that you find these things out from the media, not from the government that you're essentially a member of, or the party that you're a member of?
No, I'm comfortable with the work of good journalism as well, to be honest. So I think it's an important balance to strike. The details, obviously, I can't confirm. I don't have them until tomorrow.
Would you personally re-welcome joining the customs union?
I don't think it's a job for this government.
So you don't think it is? So the government turns around in 2 years' time and says, we're going to do it. You're going to say, I welcomed it.
The Prime Minister made very clear at the dispatch box last week that there is no case for it. This is about resetting the relationship with the European Union. The country voted to leave, but we were then handed and suffer still a bad Brexit deal.
We will see how long that lasts, James. I suspect we might be back here in a couple of years' time telling a different story, we'll see. But, James, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much indeed. And, of course, this is going to feature in tomorrow's papers. We've got our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us this evening will be the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, that's Henry Hill, and the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman. That's at 10:30 tonight here on Sky News. OK, you're watching the Politics Up next, the government announces an independent review into foreign financial interference in UK politics after the former leader of Reform UK in Wales was jailed for taking money to make pro-Russian statements. We'll be talking about that and more in just a couple of minutes.
best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
You're watching the Politics Hub here on Sky News. Now, the government has launched an independent review into foreign financial interference here in the UK. It comes, of course, after the former leader of Reform UK in Wales, Nathan Gill, was jailed for taking money to make pro-Russian statements. Well, speaking in the Commons, the Housing and Communities and Local Government Secretary Steve Reid said that Gill's conduct was a stain on British democracy, a view that was echoed also by the Conservative front bench.
A British politician took bribes to further the interests of the Russian regime, a regime which forcefully deported vulnerable Ukrainian children and killed a British citizen on British soil using a deadly nerve agent. This conduct is a stain on our democracy. The independent review will work to remove that stain. The purpose of the review is to provide an in-depth assessment of the current financial rules and safeguards and make recommendations.
Protecting the integrity of our democratic system from foreign interference is not a partisan issue. It goes to the heart of public trust in our elections. Interference in our elections from foreign actors is something that we must all be vigilant against, and I concur fully with what the Secretary of State has said about Nathan Gill and join him in his sincere thanks to the CPS and the police. Any crime such as this deserves full condemnation from all members of this House.
Well, let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who is with me. And John, obviously this follows that court case. In theory, though, this is a wider review into all sorts of different foreign interference.
In theory.
Yes.
In practice, I mean, it sounds like a Reform UK bashing exercise. I mean, you heard what Mr. Reid said about Nathan Gill, and MP after MP talked about Reform UK.
Because we heard, didn't we, Ed Davey bring this up at PMQs, asking for this a couple of weeks ago.
That's right. And Ed Davey criticised Mr Farage for not launching his own inquiry. Reform UK did welcome it. It was left to Richard Tice, the deputy leader, to speak for Reform. And he, along with quite a lot of MPs, were calling for inquiries into China as well. And also a cryptocurrency. Well, that seems like another means of targeting Reform, because I think they've had those sort of donations. But Richard Tice was talking about, as did quite a few Tories actually, he talked about the irony of protecting democracy a week after cancelling mayoral elections. Tories made that point as well. But Richard Tice talked about the Chinese Communist regime and the Labour Party. A senior MP allegedly received hundreds of thousands of pounds of donations from a potential Chinese spy. That was a story we covered on Sky News. That was to do with Barry Gardner, the veteran, I think we can call him, Labour MP. And then, of course, he talked about the Chagos Islands, the Chinese spy case collapse, and even the mega embassy. A few MPs mentioned that as well.
The question is, John, where is this going to lead? Or is this, as you say, just an exercise to kind of bring this issue up time and time again for political reasons?
Interesting that it's a bit of a rush job. It's going to report in March, of course, just before the elections for the May elections get underway, when, of course, Reform are expected to do well. The fact is, it's going to be conducted actually by a former civil servant, Philip Rycroft. He was, if you remember, he was the Brexit permanent secretary a few years back. The government really, I mean, Mr Reid did very well, announcing all this with a straight face. He had the very serious Dan Jarvis alongside him. Electoral resilience. But I lost count the number of times Nigel Farage was mentioned. The Deputy Speaker, Caroline Noakes, ticked MPs off, said, have you mentioned to Mr Farage that you're going to mention him in the Commons? Okay. Oh, yes. Not sure about that.
OK.
But clearly, the Tories, Lib Dems and Labour want to bash Reform. Other parties want to talk about the Chinese.
So, Hannah, it's pretty clear, I think, John Craig's not convinced by this. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's very important and it needs to be done. But unfortunately, John's absolutely right. It comes at a moment when it feels like it's being motivated by reform. Now, what happened with Nathan Gill was horrific, and the Chinese stuff is also hugely concerning, that British politics is being infiltrated by foreign actors, and this is not new. Russia have been kicking about the Commons, having an influence. You know, there was a big story, many people will remember, some time ago, of the Tories accepting money, dirty Russian money, and
but
most
isn't
of the parties
isn't the question then that we don't need a kind of review into this is happening? If we all know it's kind of happening, don't we just need better measures to
I think that's a very fair point. And we had a sanctions and anti-money laundering bill. I sat on that bill committee. The government at the time were not terribly interested in bringing in those measures, and Salisbury happened in the middle of it, and all of a sudden everybody suddenly wanted to take action.
Was Tom a member of that government?
I was a member of that government. But I mean, look, I think all of us should be able...
Not holding Tom individually responsible, but
it's probably not right. But I think, look, all of us in politics should be able to get behind the principle of what they're trying to achieve here. I'm sceptical about the fact that a comprehensive, credible piece of work can be done in a 12-week window, particularly when you've got Christmas coming as well. The fact it's not statutory as well concerns me, because that limits the scope of being able to call witnesses and for people to have to appear. Actually, we should be doing a proper root and branch job here with some proper recommendations, properly trying to get the political parties around the table.
Politically, isn't there a chance that this just backfires? I mean, you look at kind of the suggestions around Trump and Russia, and actually in the end it probably benefited him to some degree. That actually, if people just think it is a political stitch-up job, they're just not going to believe it. They'll believe more that there's a kind of conspiracy against reform.
I think that is one of the risks that government is carrying with this. We've seen it play out, exactly as you say, in the US, where all of these claims being thrown around only strengthened Donald Trump's hand when it came to the electorate. And people went out and they voted for him in huge numbers, and that increased because of all the mud that was slung at him. Some deserved, some probably not deserved. So for me, we ought to be having a more thorough look at this root and branch, particularly, I think, having a look at the online space, where there's huge potential risk, as we've seen, for online interference.
Tom, Hannah, for the moment, thank you very much. And indeed, to John Craig, thank you very much, as always. John Craig there, our Chief Political Correspondent. OK, you're watching the Politics Hub here on Sky News. Up next, we'll be discussing the future of the BBC as Donald Trump launches a $10 billion lawsuit against the broadcaster. Now, the Prime Minister has said that Jewish people must not be cowed by terror, vowing to root out anti-Semitism in the UK tonight. Keir Starmer was speaking at a Hanukkah reception at Downing Street. Comes, of course, in the wake of that attack on Bondi Beach at the weekend in Sydney. The event was attended by the Chief Rabbi, as you can see, and the Prime Minister spoke to the gathering about the need to stand together in defence of the Jewish way of life.
We light the Hanukkah candles here in Downing Street, as I did with Vic on Sunday evening, at the very heart of the British government, determined to defeat this poison of anti-Semitism together. We must not be cowed by terror. We must not give in to hatred and poisonous extremism.
Now, the US President Donald Trump has said he's going to sue the BBC for up to $10 billion of the editing of that speech he made before the 2021 Capitol riots. The broadcaster previously apologised over the clips that were spliced together in a Panorama documentary, but rejected his demands for compensation. It's already led, of course, to the resignation of the Director General Tim Davie and the Head of News Deborah Turness. And here's some of what the US President had to say last night.
I'm suing the BBC for putting words in my mouth, literally. They put words in my mouth. They had me saying things that I never said coming out. I guess they used AI or something. So we'll be bringing that lawsuit. A lot of people are asking, when are you bringing that lawsuit? Even the media can't believe that one. They actually put terrible words in my mouth having to do with January 6th that I didn't say. And the beautiful words that I said, right? The beautiful words. Talking about patriotism and all of the good things that I said, they didn't say that, but they put terrible words. They actually have me speaking with words that I never said, and they got caught because I believe somebody at BBC said, this is so bad, it has to be reported. That's called fake news.
Well, in a statement, the BBC said this: as we have made clear previously, we will be defending this case. We are not going to make further comment on ongoing legal proceedings. Well, all this comes as the government has published a green paper on potential reforms to the BBC, with the corporation's Royal Charter up for renewal in 2027. As part of the process to renew the BBC's Royal Charter, the government's review will include ensuring that the BBC is sustainably funded. The government say options that it is considering include reform of the licence fee, whether licence fee concessions should be updated, and options for the BBC to generate more commercial revenue. The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, had this to say.
The BBC is one of the most important institutions in our country, and it's faced significant challenges in recent years, but it belongs to us all. Our job through the Charter Review is to make sure that it can continue to provide trusted news and content that reflects the entire nation, all of our nations and regions, not just the lives and experiences of some, that it can be a light on the hill for people across the world, and that it can remain at the beating heart of our democracy as it has done now for 100 years. That means that we've got to ensure that it is sustainably funded. It means we've got to ensure that it is accountable to people in every nation and region.
OK, let's bring Tom and Hannah back in on this. I think let's talk about, as you can see at the strap at the bottom, the BBC future rather than necessarily Mr. Trump. And actually, it's really interesting, Tom, listening to Lisa Nandy there. It's pretty clear that the BBC do have an ally in the Labour Party in government.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And I think that all of us should want to see a successful BBC.
Is that true? I mean, there's many people within the Conservative Party who don't want, and have made it pretty clear. In fact, I would say one of your former leaders, Boris Johnson, didn't want to see a successful BBC.
I think the BBC does a lot of very good work. I think there's a lot of first-class journalism that you see come out of the BBC. But there are questions, there are confidence issues that people have around some of the judgments that are made. I think, I do struggle when you look at what has happened with President Trump. They just picked on the wrong guy here. He was never going to accept that situation. Do I think suing is the right thing? Of course I don't. There is a different culture when it comes to that in the US. But actually, you do have to question, for example, how editorially that was able to happen, how there wasn't, for example, a flash across the screen between those two bits of footage, or how there wasn't a voiceover that said, and 50 minutes later, this is what President Trump went on to say. There were some bad judgment calls there. And I think in a modern age, the licence fee is quite difficult to justify, particularly as consumers get their coverage from different places.
Is it difficult to justify, Hannah?
I don't think so. It has to modernise. They've handed Donald Trump a massive own goal, and at risk of being barred from going to see my national team play in the first World Cup in quite a long time. It was, I mean, his rant is just...
You're worried about your social media, aren't
you? No, I mean, I'm far beyond that. It's just unhinged nonsense. But, you know, they did something wrong. As Tom says, they picked on the wrong guy. But we absolutely have to defend the principle of a public service broadcaster, and we have to defend it, because if it's not there, we can't challenge it. And I have, you know, I've had many issues with the BBC and the way it's reported certain things over the years. But we have to fight to have it so that we can challenge it and make it the best it can possibly be. And some of the issues, I think, often around editorial stuff, is that the funding isn't there. You look at some of the services we've lost, the World Service, you know, Nations and Regions. I was really glad to hear Lisa and Andy talk about Nations and Regions, because for a very long time the Nations and Regions haven't had their fair share spent in those areas on content.
Just to say, because, I mean, to be fair to the BBC, they would deny they haven't picked on Donald Trump. They made a mistake and they have apologised for it. But I do want to just briefly, I mean, the licence fee, in a world in which you've got loads of streamers, we've got, you know, the influence of those big American companies, surely the BBC, and actually a form of taxation to fund it, is the only way forward, isn't it not?
No, I think you've got to be more inventive in terms of the options that you look at in the world as it is, because you have got those streaming giants that more and more people are accessing. You have got the rise of social media and people accessing content and news in very different ways from when the licence fee was first envisaged. Do I think there will probably always need to be an element of the licence fee? Probably. Okay. But is there a more nuanced approach to this that can be taken, for example, around unlocking the huge archive of content? I remember when I was a newly elected MP raising what more could they do around the archive for people being able to access bits.
The one thing we have to defend is independent journalism. That's absolutely critical.
OK, well, we do that here at Sky News as well. OK, Tom, Hannah, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. We'll take one last break here on the Politics Hub, and up next, we'll be looking at a report highlighting the bizarre words and phrases used by politicians, sometimes on this very programme, and why we need a war on jargon. That's next.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8 o'clock, the man who drove his car into the Liverpool Trophy Parade is jailed for more than 21 years. Police say it was sheer luck that no one was killed. We'll hear from the man who climbed into the back of Paul Doyle's car to bring that attack to an end. That and much more on the UK Tonight from 8.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. President, what will you say next to Benjamin Netanyahu? In June 2009, did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent. I've interviewed some of America's most recognisable politicians.
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting.
Mr. Walker, you're anti-abortion, but 2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir?
Connor, what did you say to the president? What did you say?
We had a great meeting. He was a great man.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents, based in Washington, D.C. David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that?
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here.
Why only in America? Why is this American exceptionalism? I just want to understand why you do not think that guns are the problem.
Why is this just an American problem?
The anger too, and the division.
Where are you from? From Sky News, UK.
Yeah.
Back up.
Mr. Navarro, can
you I'm allowed to ask questions, aren't I?
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding, Mr. Musk. Has your ego and ignorance cost Ukrainian lives?
David Cameron needs to worry about his own country, and frankly, he can kiss my ass.
Mr Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody?
Free wherever you get your news.
What words do you have for Harry Dunn's family today?
Have a nice day.
Do you fear a fourth indictment?
Now, it might feel sometimes as though politicians are using words and phrases that you just wouldn't hear out on the street. In fact, sometimes I get confused as well. One think tank, the New Britain Project, has published a list of 25 political slogans, language and jargon that it says that real people don't understand, and it's provided its own translations. I'm going to steal this from Hannah. As Hannah said, this is the Politics Hub's version of catchphrase, if you like. So let's start with the first one. It is fixing the foundations, as you can see. Tom, what would you say that means?
Getting the basics right.
Getting the basics right, OK. Hannah?
It's a big old mess and we need to sort it out.
I think that might be more politically honest. Well, I think Tom was closest, to be fair, sorting out the basics. That was like... And it's one of these... Yeah, well, we're not keeping scores here now. We're not keeping scores.
We're not competitive as politicians.
The thing is that why do you think politicians use these?
I think they get caught up in a system and, you know, Westminster is really bad for it. I think the law is the same. There's all this technical language and you get sucked into a system and you end up using all the, you know, acronyms and language. I always tried, I think, quite hard to speak in, you know, plain language that folk would understand, because what ends up happening is it's just like they're speaking to each other, and the intention of it, and I was always convinced about this at Westminster, the whole point is to confuse and confound people and just lock them out of the whole process. You would tune into any Brexit debate and you had just...
No idea, I know.
People had no idea. I don't think a lot of the time, believe it or not, the politicians have no idea what they're talking about.
Okay.
Because the language is so inaccessible.
Let's have a look at another one. This is inequalities of income. Here it is on the screen. Inequalities of income. It seems quite obvious.
Inequalities
Hannah?
of income. I'm actually... it's not fair when you compare one to another.
OK, Tom?
Gap between rich and poor.
The gap, come on, what does it mean? Inequalities of outcome, even. Outcome.
Oh.
Some groups keep losing out.
Yeah, inequalities of income.
I'm not even entirely sure the translation makes any more sense. But this is the weird thing about politics is meant to be easily understandable, Tom. Isn't that kind of the definition of politics, is you convincing kind of people who aren't involved in it that you're right?
Yes, but I think sometimes there's people who think they're very clever in the system who want to try and capture a media headline. And so those sorts of phrases trip off the tongue when actually they're rather meaningless to people watching from home who look on with slight bemusement about the fact that politicians just don't talk their language.
OK, we've got another one. This is outcome-based commissioning. I mean, the question is who comes up with these things? What does it translate as? What do you think, guys?
We're trying to get a result on the thing that we're looking at.
You know what? I was worried that you might have cheated on this, but you clearly haven't. So that's quite reassuring. Go on, Tom.
This is the sort of specific metric that we are looking to achieve through our commission.
OK, let's see what it is. Outcome-based commissioning, paying for services based on whether they actually help people.
You'd hope people do that anyway.
But there's all like, it's right? Stakeholders, those groups and people affected by the decisions we make, service users, i.e. just ordinary members of the public. I mean, it just keeps going on.
It's totally insufferable. And it's the same thing of when politicians say, let me be clear. You're like, oh, here we go. You're clearly not being clear. And you're saying that just to cover up whatever it is that you don't want to say.
Is this ever going to change, though? Because in some ways, the worst thing about our politics, I think, is that we're talking even more in slogans. We've decided largely the public are either not listening as much as they used to or somehow thicker than we think they are. And we're just talking now in kind of 3-word slogans all the time.
It's the stuff that drives people to distraction. Probably shout at the television at home. I shout at the television at home when I see these things because they're completely meaningless. And it actually explains why people like Nigel Farage are doing very well politically in the polls at the moment, because they talk a language that is very straightforward for people to understand and are very effective at landing a point.
And there'll be two political, but who do you think, if you say Nigel Farage is good at this, anyone else in our politics who's good
I think Zach Polanski's very good at it. I think he's very good at just explaining and challenging in ordinary language, excuse me, that people will understand, and we need more of it. And people become institutionalised, but I think it's a really good reminder that...
I think take it or leave it, right?
Totally.
Agree with me or not?
Take it or leave it. We all know what that means. Well, we're going to have to leave it, I'm afraid. Tom, Hannah, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure, and Merry Christmas to you both.
Merry Christmas.
I hope it is a very festive and fun time, and a bit of relaxation too. That is it for us tonight. A relatively jargon-free zone, I would suggest. We are back, of course, at 7 tomorrow. Do join us then if you can. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah J. Mee. Have a very good evening. I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.